The last time Claire Bennett humiliated me in public, she did it beneath the yellow lights of the Hawthorne Neighborhood Association, while 23 people watched me hold a sample of hand-milled oak, like evidence in a trial. "Daniel keeps calling this restoration," she said from the second row, her voice calm enough to sound reasonable. But replacing half a historic house with whatever he thinks looks charming is not preservation. It's vanity with a tool belt. A few people laughed before they realized I wasn't laughing with them. I set the oak sample on the table. The original porch boards are rotted through. I'm matching the species, width, and milling pattern. Claire folded her arms. "You've lived here 4 months. Some of us remember the house before you decided it needed your vision." I could have answered. I had permits, photographs, structural reports, and more patience than she deserved. Instead, I gathered my plans while the room moved on without me. At 11:38 that same night, someone pounded on my front door. Claire stood on the porch in soaked sweatpants, her dark hair plastered to her cheeks, and fear had erased every sharp edge from her face. "My mother is missing," she said, "and she thinks your house is still ours." Before I tell you what happened after I let her inside, take a second to subscribe and stay with me. Some people enter your life by invitation. Others arrive in the middle of a storm and force you to open a door you had every reason to keep closed. My name is Daniel Harper. I was 30 years old then, and I restored old houses for a living in Richmond, Virginia. Not the glamorous kind of restoration that ends up in magazines with white sofas nobody sits on. I repaired sagging porches, rebuilt windows one sash at a time, and tried to save the things previous owners had covered, cut, or forgotten. I bought the weathered 1928 Craftsman on Hawthorne Avenue after my engagement ended. My former fiancée, Leah, said I preserved other people's memories because I was afraid to build a future of my own. She wasn't entirely wrong. By the time I moved in, I had decided work was safer than hope. Claire was 26, exactly 4 years younger than me, and lived in the smaller blue bungalow next door with her mother, Evelyn. She taught music at a public elementary school and carried herself like someone who had learned to stay composed because other people depended on it. Her father had died 5 years earlier. The house I bought had belonged to her grandparents, then her parents, before medical debt and taxes forced the family to sell it. I did not know any of that the day I moved in. I only knew my new neighbor looked at my truck, my ladders, and the sold sign as if I had personally stolen something from her. Her first insult came before I had unpacked. "You know the porch isn't supposed to lean like that," she called from her driveway. "I was hoping it was a regional style. That joke will be less charming when the roof drops on your head." The next week, she corrected me in front of the mail carrier about the paint color. At a block barbecue, she called me the latest man with money and a demolition fantasy, though I had not demolished a cabinet hinge. When a truck blocked her driveway for 6 minutes, she asked the driver whether I had also purchased the street. Each remark was polished enough to deny if challenged and pointed enough to draw blood. I told myself I didn't care. That was one of the habits I had brought from my old life. When something hurt, I called it irrelevant and worked longer. But that night, with rain blowing across my porch and Claire's hands shaking, none of our usual arguments mattered. "When did you last see her?" I asked. 10:45. She was asleep on the couch. I went upstairs to take a shower, and when I came back, the front door was open. "Does she have a phone?" She left it. "She has early onset Alzheimer's." The words came fast, clipped by panic. "Some nights she wakes up and thinks she's 30. Sometimes she thinks my father is still alive. When she gets confused, she comes here because this was home before the Blue House was." I looked past Claire toward the rain-dark street. "Have you called the police?" "Yes. They're sending someone, but she's wearing slippers, Daniel. She doesn't have a coat." Does she have places she usually goes? The church garden, the old pharmacy. But tonight she kept talking about the greenhouse. I turned back to her. What greenhouse? Her eyes moved toward the rear of my property. The lot behind my house was deep, crowded with ivy and volunteer trees. At the far edge, hidden behind a collapsed fence and years of honeysuckle, stood a small brick structure I had assumed was an old shed. Its roof was mostly glass, though half the panes were broken and the rest were green with moss. Claire grabbed my sleeve. My father built it for her. We crossed the yard with flashlights, calling Evelyn's name into the rain. The grass soaked through my boots. Claire moved too quickly, slipping once on the mud, and I caught her by the elbow. "I'm fine," she snapped automatically. "I know. Slow down anyway." For once, she listened. The greenhouse door had swollen shut. I put my shoulder against it until the frame groaned and gave way. Inside, the air smelled of wet soil, rust, and old leaves. My flashlight moved across broken pots, a wooden bench, and a woman curled beneath it in a thin nightgown. Claire made a sound I had never heard from another human being, half sob and half prayer. "Mom." Evelyn looked up, confused but alive. Her gray-streaked hair clung to her forehead. She stared first at Claire, then at me. "Thomas?" she whispered. Claire froze. Thomas had been her father. I crouched beside Evelyn and took off my jacket. "No, ma'am. I'm Daniel. I live in the house now." Her eyes filled. "Then tell him I waited." Claire pressed both hands over her mouth. I wrapped Evelyn in my jacket, lifted her carefully, and carried her through the rain while Claire held the flashlight ahead of us. At the porch, Evelyn leaned against my chest and looked up at the house as if she could see another decade layered over the present. "The blue tile is still under the kitchen window," she said. "Don't let them take it." Then she closed her eyes. That was the first night Claire Bennett came to my door. It was also the first time I understood that every cruel word she had thrown at me was standing on top of grief. The paramedics said Evelyn was cold and bruised, but otherwise unharmed. They took her to the hospital, and Claire rode with her. I followed because she had left her purse, charger, and every practical thought in my hallway. At 2 a.m, I found her sitting alone beside a vending machine outside the emergency department. She had changed into a hospital blanket because her clothes were still wet. Without the armor of a neat blouse and careful posture, she looked younger than 26 and far more tired. I held out her purse. She looked at it, then at me. "You didn't have to come." "I know. That's not an answer. It's the one I have." She took the purse. Her fingers brushed mine, and she pulled her hand back as if contact required permission neither of us had granted. "The doctor says she can go home in the morning," she said. "They want to adjust her medication and talk about additional care." "Good." Claire nodded, but her face did not match the word. I sat in the chair beside hers, leaving a respectful space. For several minutes, we listened to the vending machine hum. Finally, she said, "What I said at the meeting was unfair." I looked at her. She stared at the opposite wall. "Your porch work is historically accurate. I checked the preservation standards before I spoke." "You checked and said it anyway?" Her jaw tightened. "Yes, that is a remarkable apology." "I didn't say it was an apology." "No. You said something worse." She turned toward me, offended for half a second, then ashamed. I know. Claire had embarrassed me repeatedly. Her fear did not erase that, and grief did not make cruelty harmless. I could understand her wound without volunteering to become its target. "Why?" I asked. She pulled the hospital blanket tighter around her shoulders. Because every time I see you replacing a board or opening a wall, I feel like I'm watching another piece of my family disappear. I'm trying to save the house. You're changing it. Saving something always changes it. She flinched as if I had struck a hidden place. I softened my voice. Not the truth. Rot doesn't become history just because you loved who stood on it. Her eyes shone, but she did not look away. You make everything sound simple. No, I make wood sound simple. People are a disaster. A tired laugh escaped her before she could stop it. It was quiet and surprised, like a note from an instrument she had forgotten she owned. Then the emergency department doors opened, and a nurse called her name. I stood. Go. Claire took 2 steps, then turned back. The blue tile she mentioned. Is it still there? I haven't seen one. It was a small cobalt square under the kitchen window. My father put it in after a trip to Charleston. My mother hated it because it didn't match anything. After he died, she wouldn't let anyone touch it. I'll look. Her expression shifted with relief so immediate, it made me wonder how rarely anyone offered her something without asking for strength in return. Thank you, she said. The next afternoon, I found the tile beneath 3 layers of cheap laminate backsplash. It was chipped along one edge, surrounded by crumbling grout, and exactly as blue as Claire had described. I did not remove it. Instead, I cleaned the surface, covered it with a square of cardboard, and wrote, "Do not touch across the front." 2 days later, Evelyn returned home. I saw Claire helping her from a car while a home health nurse carried bags behind them. I kept my distance until Evelyn noticed me. "Thomas," she called. Claire closed her eyes. I walked down my steps. "Daniel, ma'am." Evelyn studied my face, then smiled. "You're taller than Thomas. I've been working on it." She laughed. Claire looked at me with unwilling gratitude. "Did you find my tile?" Evelyn asked. "I did." "Good." Claire never liked that kitchen. "I was 12, Claire said. "I wanted purple walls. You had poor judgment." I glanced at Claire. Some patterns continue. Her eyes narrowed, but Evelyn laughed harder. And for the first time, the sharpness between Claire and me did not feel like a weapon. It felt almost like play. Almost. That evening, Claire knocked again. This time it was daylight, and she held a glass container covered with foil. "My mother made lasagna," she said. "Your mother just came home from the hospital. She supervised from a chair and insulted my knife skills. Successful recovery then." Claire extended the container. "This is for carrying her through a storm. I would have done it for anyone." "I know. That somehow makes it harder to repay." "You don't have to repay basic decency." Her gaze dropped. "I may not have much experience with that." The sentence was soft enough that I could have pretended not to hear it. I took the lasagna. "Come see the tile," I said. She followed me into the house, cautiously. The front rooms were stripped to plaster. Drop cloths covered the floor, and tools lined one wall in the order I used them. "You organize chisels by width? Doesn't everyone?" "No. Most people have lives. Those are rumors spread by people with dull chisels." She tried not to smile. In the kitchen, I removed the cardboard. Claire stopped so abruptly I nearly walked into her. For a moment, she did not touch the tile. She just looked. Then she pressed 2 fingers against the blue surface. "My father installed this on a Sunday," she said. "He measured the center wrong, and Mom told him it would bother her for the rest of her life. He said that was how he knew she'd always remember him." Her smile trembled. "I can design the new backsplash around it," I said. "You'd do that? It belongs to the house." Her hand fell to her side. I thought you wanted a clean slate. I bought an old house, Claire. A clean slate would be a strange choice. She looked around the torn-open kitchen, seeing perhaps for the first time that demolition and destruction were not the same thing. On a work table nearby were labeled envelopes containing original nails, hinge screws, and fragments of wallpaper I planned to document before discarding. You kept all of this? I need to know what was here before I decide what should stay. She picked up a faded strip patterned with tiny green leaves. This was in my bedroom. Your bedroom was over the dining room? Yes. I used to tap on the radiator pipe when I couldn't sleep. My father would tap back from the kitchen. I pointed toward a boxed section in the wall. That pipe is still there. Claire followed me upstairs. In the room over the dining room, I tapped the old iron pipe with the handle of a screwdriver. Once. Twice. Once. From below, the sound traveled faintly through the wall. Claire's face changed. Not dramatically. Her shoulders simply lowered, as if she had been carrying something for years and had set down one corner of it. I haven't heard that since I was 17, she whispered. I handed her the screwdriver. She tapped the same pattern. Nothing answered, of course. Still, she stood there listening. When she finally looked at me, the person in her expression was not the woman from the association meeting. She was a daughter in an empty room, waiting for a reply she knew would never come. I'm sorry, she said. This time it was an apology. I nodded. I accept that you're sorry. That isn't the same as forgiving me. No. She absorbed the answer without arguing. Good, I thought. Because whatever might be beginning between us, it could not be built by pretending the damage had never happened. The following Saturday, Claire appeared at the edge of my driveway, wearing old jeans, work gloves, and an expression that suggested she regretted every decision that had brought her there. My mother says the greenhouse used to have white roses, she said. I lowered the board I was carrying. Good morning to you, too. She also says there were shelves along the east wall and a potting table under the large window. There are remains of both. Claire glanced toward the overgrown structure. I want to help repair it. I waited. She frowned. You could make this easier? I could. I'm enjoying this. I am attempting to behave like a decent neighbor. Attempt noted. Her mouth twitched. Do I need your permission to clear vines? You need gloves thicker than those, a tetanus shot, and the humility to admit you don't know poison ivy from Virginia creeper. I teach 63 children how to hold recorders without injuring each other. I can identify a plant. Those are different survival skills. She stayed anyway. We spent 4 hours cutting honeysuckle away from the greenhouse. Claire worked with the focused intensity she brought to everything, but she was terrible with pruning shears. She attacked stems at random, left stubs in the wrong places, and denied being tired until she sat down on an overturned bucket without meaning to. I handed her water. You can say it, she said. Say what? That I'm incompetent. You're not incompetent. You're aggressively untrained. She laughed, and this time there was no surprise in it. Evelyn watched us from Claire's back porch beneath a blanket. Some moments she understood exactly what we were doing. Other moments she called the greenhouse a conservatory and asked when Thomas would return with the glass. Each time, Claire answered gently, even when the answer hurt. At noon, Evelyn fell asleep. Claire and I shared sandwiches beside the brick wall. Your mother seems comfortable with you, I said. She is, until she isn't. Last month she accused me of stealing her daughter's clothes. What did you do? I told her I would return them after laundry day. That worked? For 6 minutes. Claire picked at the crust of her sandwich. People tell caregivers to treasure every moment. It makes me want to scream. Some moments are beautiful. Some are terrifying. Some are just cleaning the same floor twice while someone you love asks why you're in their house. You don't have to make it beautiful for me. She looked over. I knew that exhaustion from the months after my father's heart attack, when I drove 2 hours each way to help him relearn ordinary tasks. Everyone praised my patience. No one asked about the anger I swallowed. My dad is fine now, I said. But after his surgery, he hated needing me. I hated that he hated it. We were both ashamed of things that weren't shameful. Claire nodded slowly. That sounds familiar. The air between us softened. Over the next several weeks, helping with the greenhouse became a pattern. Claire came over after school twice a week. I taught her how to scrape old putty from window frames, how to test wood for rot, and how to hold a hammer without gripping it like an enemy. She taught me that third graders could turn any object into percussion, and that silence in a classroom usually meant someone had found glue. Evelyn sat nearby when the weather allowed. On clear days, she told stories about the house. I began writing them down, not because every detail was reliable, but because memory did not have to be accurate to deserve tenderness. Claire noticed the notebook one evening. What are you doing? Making a record of Mom's stories? And the house. Her version is part of its history. She stared at me long enough to make me uncomfortable. What? I asked. You listen to her like she isn't broken. She isn't. Claire looked away quickly. I know that. I know you know. No, you don't. Her voice sharpened, then fell. Sometimes I forget. Not that I love her. I forget that the disease isn't all she is. Then someone like you comes along and sees her for 10 minutes, and I resent you for making it look easy. I don't think it's easy. You make it look that way. That's because I get to go home next door. The truth stopped her. I continued. You're allowed to be tired, Claire. You're allowed to need help before you collapse. She stood abruptly and carried a tray of tools inside the greenhouse. For a moment, I thought I had pushed too far. Then she said, without turning around, There's a caregiver group on Thursdays. I've had the number for 3 months. Thursday is tomorrow. I know. Do you want me to sit with Evelyn? Claire faced me. You would do that? For 2 hours? She may call you Thomas. I've been called worse by her daughter. She gave me a look, but it lacked heat. 2 hours. No power tools. She likes old movies, but not musicals because she complains nobody sings during normal conflict. Your mother is correct. Claire went to the group. That Thursday evening, Evelyn and I watched an old black and white mystery. Halfway through, she became lucid enough to ask why I was helping. Claire asked. Claire never asks. She's learning. Evelyn smiled faintly. She thinks anger keeps things from leaving. Did she always? After Thomas died. Evelyn looked toward the dark window. Before that, she sang in every room. Loud child, terrible pitch. She teaches music, I know. Life has a sense of humor. A few minutes later, Evelyn drifted and asked whether I had fed the dog. There was no dog. I answered that he had eaten. When Claire returned, her eyes were red, but her face looked lighter. How was it? I asked at the door. Awful. Going back? Yes. She stepped inside to check on Evelyn, who was asleep beneath the quilt. Claire adjusted the edge near her mother's shoulder, then stood beside me in the dim room. Thank you, she whispered. You've said that twice now. Don't keep count. I restore houses. Keeping count is most of the job. She turned toward me. We were standing close enough that I could see a small fleck of green paint near her jaw from the greenhouse frames. Without thinking, I lifted my thumb and wiped it away. Claire went still. So did I. Her eyes met mine, and the room seemed to narrow around the space between us. There was no joke available, No sharp remark that could make the moment harmless. "Daniel," she said quietly. Evelyn stirred on the couch. Claire stepped back. The moment broke, but it did not disappear. It went with me next door, followed me upstairs, and stayed awake long after I turned out the lights. 3 days later, while removing the damaged cabinet beneath the kitchen window, I found a narrow tin box wedged behind the baseboard. It was the kind used for old checks, painted black and spotted with rust. Inside were photographs, a folded survey of the property, and 6 letters tied with faded red thread. Most were from Thomas Bennett to Evelyn during the first year of their marriage. I did not read them. I carried the box next door. Claire opened the door in stocking feet. I found this behind the kitchen cabinet. She saw the handwriting on the top envelope and forgot to breathe. Where? Under the blue tile. Evelyn was having a difficult afternoon and did not recognize the box. Claire sat at her dining table while I made tea in a kitchen that was not mine. She untied the thread with careful fingers. The first letters made her smile. The fourth made her cry silently. The last was not addressed to Evelyn. It said, "For Claire, when she is ready to stop blaming herself." She stared at the words. "I didn't know this existed. You don't have to read it now." "Yes, I do." I moved toward the living room to give her privacy, but she caught my wrist. "Stay." So I sat across from her while she unfolded the letter. Thomas had written it during the final months of his illness. Claire read in silence, one hand pressed to her mouth. When she finished, she pushed the page toward me. I hesitated. "Please." Thomas wrote that selling the Craftsman had been his decision. Taxes, repairs, and medical bills had become too much. More importantly, he did not want Claire to give up college, work, or her 20s preserving a building because she believed it preserved him. "A house," he wrote, "is supposed to shelter the living, not demand that they become caretakers of the dead." Near the bottom was one final line. "Your mother will need you someday, but she will also need you to keep living." Claire stood so quickly her chair scraped the floor. "He knew," she said. I folded the letter along its old crease. "He was worried. I told him I would quit school and take care of everything. I was 21 and angry at everyone. He sold the house 2 months later. I thought Mom had convinced him. I blamed her. Then after he died, I blamed myself for not fighting harder." She paced to the window. "And when you bought it, I decided you were the final proof that I had failed. I'm not proof of anything. I know that now. I gave her time. When she turned around, grief had opened her face in a way that made honesty impossible to avoid. "I have been cruel to you," she said. "Not defensive, not difficult." "Cruel?" "Yes." She nodded, as if she needed me not to rescue her from the word. "I am sorry. I believe you. And I don't expect that to fix it. It doesn't." "What does?" "Different behavior. Repeated for a long time." A weak smile touched her mouth. "You really know how to ruin a dramatic apology. I work in structural repair. I distrust cosmetic solutions." She laughed through tears, and then she crossed the space between us and put her arms around me. For one startled second, I did not move. Then I held her. She was not fragile. That was the first thing I understood. She was exhausted, grieving, and afraid, but not fragile. Her forehead rested against my shoulder. My hand settled between her shoulder blades. We stayed that way until the kettle clicked off in the kitchen. When she lifted her face, we were close. Too close for pretending. Her gaze dropped to my mouth. Mine did the same. Then Evelyn called from the living room. "Claire, Thomas is at the door. Claire stepped away. The ache of the interrupted moment was almost sweet, because neither of us could deny what it had been. A week later, the Hawthorne Association announced a special hearing about my workshop. The detached garage had once been a carriage building. I planned to restore it for custom millwork. The city approved the use with limits on hours, deliveries, and noise. I expected questions, not a petition. 14 neighbors had signed it. At the top of the list was Claire Bennett. I found the notice taped to my front door on a Tuesday afternoon. Claire was in her driveway unloading groceries. I crossed the lawn holding the paper. "What is this?" She saw the petition and went pale. "Daniel, I can explain." "Please do. I signed it before the night Mom disappeared. The filing date is last Friday. I know. Andrew brought the final version last Friday, but I had agreed before—" "Who is Andrew?" "An architect on the Preservation Committee. He thinks commercial use will change the block. It isn't commercial retail. It's a private workshop." "You know that, yes." "You've been inside it. You helped me measure the windows. I know." "Then why is your name on this?" Claire set the grocery bag on the hood of her car. "Because I'm afraid." "Of what? Noise, trucks, strangers? Mom wandering over there when machinery is running? I know you'll be careful, but what if you sell someday? What if the permit stays with the property? What if you had spoken to me?" She stopped. I held up the page. "You came into my house. You asked me to care for your mother. You let me read your father's letter. And when something scared you, you went back to a room full of people and used them against me. That isn't what I meant to do." "It is exactly what you did." Her eyes filled. "I was going to withdraw my name. After the hearing?" "No. Before." "When, Claire? After you decided whether I had earned the truth?" She looked toward her mother's front window, perhaps checking whether Evelyn could see us. The gesture, innocent as it was, made me feel hidden. "I can fix this," she said. "That is what people say when they want the consequence to disappear before they have understood it. That's not fair." "No. Fair would have been a conversation." I walked back to my house. She followed me to the porch. "Daniel, please." I turned. "Do you know what the worst part is? It isn't the permit. I can fight the petition. The worst part is that I believed you had stopped trying to humiliate me. I wasn't trying to humiliate you. You just keep choosing methods that do." Her face crumpled for a second before she controlled it. I opened my door. I need distance. This time, when Claire stood outside my house asking me to let her in, I closed the door. For 6 days, I worked with the radio on and the windows closed. Claire texted twice. The first message said she had withdrawn her name from the petition. The second said she understood that withdrawal was not the same as repair. I did not answer either one. At the special hearing, the association room was fuller than before. Andrew Cole, a polished man in an expensive jacket, presented photographs of other neighborhoods where workshops had altered residential character. He spoke as if my garage were the first step toward a factory. I sat at the front with my permits, sound control plan, delivery schedule, and an embarrassing awareness of the empty chair beside Evelyn. When public comment began, 2 neighbors spoke against me. One repeated Claire's old phrase about vanity with a tool belt. It drew another small laugh. Then the rear door opened. Claire entered with Evelyn on her arm. She helped her mother into a chair and walked to the microphone alone. Andrew leaned toward her. "Claire, we already submitted your written concern. I'm not here to repeat it." The room quieted. Claire placed a folder on this podium. Her hands shook, but her voice did not. "My name was on the petition," she said. "I signed because I was frightened about my mother's safety, and because I have a long history of mistaking control for protection. I did not speak directly to Daniel before using a public process against him. That was wrong." Andrew shifted in his chair. Claire continued. I have also made repeated comments in this room and around this neighborhood, suggesting that Daniel does not respect the history of his home. Those comments were false. I knew some of them were false when I made them. No one laughed now. He preserved original windows other contractors told him to replace. He documented wallpaper most people would have thrown away. He built an entire kitchen design around one chipped blue tile because it mattered to my mother. He is restoring the greenhouse my father built, not because it adds value to his property, but because a frightened woman remembered love there. Her eyes found mine. I cannot ask anyone here to trust my opinion only when it is convenient for me. So I brought documentation, photographs, material records, and a statement from the city preservation officer confirming that Daniel's work meets the district standards. I also reviewed the workshop permit. The safety conditions are stricter than I understood, and Daniel has added safeguards that were not required. She opened the folder and handed copies to the board. Then she looked back at the room. I humiliated him because grief made me angry, and because anger felt easier than admitting I was afraid. That explains my behavior. It does not excuse it. I am asking that my earlier statements be removed from consideration. The chairwoman adjusted her glasses. And your position on the permit? I support it. Andrew whispered something I could not hear. Claire turned toward him. No. You may not use my family history to make your argument stronger. I already did enough of that myself. For the first time since I had met her, Claire was not using composure as a wall. She was using it to stand still inside the consequences. The permit passed by 1 vote. Afterward, neighbors gathered around the board table. I packed my papers slowly. Claire waited near the door with Evelyn, but she did not approach until I looked at her. I meant what I said, she told me. I know. I am not asking you to forgive me tonight. Good. A trace of pain crossed her face, but she nodded. Evelyn reached for my hand. Are you coming to supper? Claire began. Mom. Not tonight, I said, but soon. Evelyn seemed satisfied. Claire did not. Still, she walked her mother home without asking for more than I could give. 3 nights later, a windstorm moved through Richmond. Near midnight, a temporary greenhouse panel tore loose, and rain blew through the frame. I was fastening a tarp when Claire appeared with a flashlight and a box of roofing screws. I saw your light, she said. You shouldn't be out here. Neither should you. We worked without discussing the hearing. She held the ladder, passed tools, and followed every instruction without turning competence into a contest. When the tarp was secure, we stood inside the greenhouse listening to rain drum against it. Claire's hair was wet again, though not as soaked as the first night she had come to me. I keep arriving at your house during storms, she said. You have a dramatic sense of timing. I rehearsed a speech. That sounds dangerous. It was very organized, terrifying. She smiled, then became serious. I withdrew from the preservation committee, she said. Not because disagreement is wrong, but because I used the position to punish someone. I also apologized to the neighbors I involved and told the principal at my school that I need 2 afternoons a week protected for Mom's care arrangements. My aunt is coming on Tuesdays. I'm keeping the Thursday group. I listened. I know none of that earns a relationship with you, she continued. I'm doing it because it needed to be done. But there is one thing I need to say for myself. The rain filled the pause. I love you, she said. I think I started when you found the blue tile. Maybe before that, when you carried Mom through the rain and never once acted as if she was a burden. I fought it because loving you meant admitting the house could change and still hold my family. It meant I could change, too. I looked at the woman who had wounded me, apologized without demanding rescue, and then changed her behavior where other people could see it. I love you too, I said, But I can't be the person you punish whenever being loved scares you. You won't be. You can't promise fear will disappear. No. She stepped closer. I can promise what I'll do when it comes. I'll speak to you before I speak about you. I'll ask instead of accuse. And when I fail, I'll name it before you have to drag the truth out of me. That sounds less romantic than your prepared speech. It had better punctuation, too. I laughed. Then I kissed her. It was not a reward or an rupture. It was a choice made with the whole truth between us. Claire's cold hands touched my face. Mine settled at her waist. Outside, the storm moved east. Inside the broken greenhouse, something that had been damaged was not restored to what it had been. It became something new. Over the next 8 months, the house changed room by room. So did we. Claire still disagreed with me. Often. She disliked the brass light fixture in the hallway and said my dining chairs looked like they belonged in a courthouse. I told her purple paint suggestions proved Evelyn had been right about her judgment. The difference was that disagreement no longer required an audience. When she was afraid, she practiced saying it plainly. When I was hurt, I practiced staying in the room instead of disappearing into work. Neither skill came naturally. Both became easier with repetition. Evelyn's illness progressed. In early spring, she moved into a memory care community 15 minutes away, a decision that nearly broke Claire, even though it was the safest one. I went with her on moving day. We placed Thomas's photograph on the dresser and brought a pot of white roses from the greenhouse. The greenhouse was finished by May. We kept the old brick, rebuilt the roof with salvaged glass, and installed shelves along the east wall. On the potting table sat a framed copy of Thomas's letter, but only the line Claire chose to share. A house is supposed to shelter the living. The neighborhood spring tour came on a bright Saturday. Dozens of people walked through my home. At the kitchen window, Claire told the story of the blue tile. At the greenhouse, she introduced me to visitors as the man who saved everything worth saving, and taught me that worth saving does not mean untouched. Later, after everyone left, we sat on the front steps with paper cups of coffee. "You embarrassed me today," I said. Her face fell. "What did I do?" "You told 40 strangers I taught you something." She studied me, then saw the joke. "That was praise. I'm not used to it from you. Get comfortable." Across the yard, white roses climbed the greenhouse frame. Claire rested her head on my shoulder. My house no longer felt like a refuge from the future. It felt like a place where one was being built. The first time Claire came to my door, she needed help finding someone she loved. In the end, we found more than Evelyn in that storm. Claire found a way to carry memory without letting it become a weapon. I found that protecting myself from humiliation was not the same as protecting myself from love. And the old house, with its crooked blue tile and repaired windows, held all of it. The grief, the mistakes, the apologies, and the life that came after. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who believes damaged things must either remain broken or be made exactly as they were. Sometimes healing is neither. Sometimes it is the courage to rebuild honestly, together.